exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, good morning.
Plan better.
We are live. This is Senate Transportation. It's Thursday, February 29th. We're returning to S-184, our automatic traffic law enforcement bill. And we're lucky to have Elizabeth Keys from the Connecticut Department of Transportation to talk about their project, which is very similar to what we're looking at. So we're glad to have you, Ms. Keys, to have you tell us what your experience was with this. And then after that, we have some law enforcement folks to weigh in on the bill. So with that, Ms. Keys, you can introduce yourself for the record and let us know. I don't know if I haven't looked to see if you have a presentation or if you were just gonna talk to us.
I do have a presentation and I'm gonna attempt to share my screen. I don't know if the host can enable that. But yeah, very quickly before I am able to do that, my name is Elizabeth Keys. I am the Chief of Legal and Regulatory Affairs, here we go, at the Connecticut Department of Transportation. In this role, I'm just gonna move things around a little bit so I can see better. And in this role, I report directly to the commissioner. I thank you, of course, for having me here to speak with you today about our experience with the programs. In my capacity, I oversee various offices such as the legislative office, our legal office, and our Office of State Traffic Administration. I will warn you, I'm not an engineer, I'm an attorney. So if you have any questions about anything that I cannot answer today, I will definitely try to speak with our program folks and get you more information. But I'm going to start first with our work zone camera program, because we do have both the work zone camera program, and we recently last year the state passed a municipal option program for speed and red light cameras. I'll address that briefly because I think what you're more interested in Senate Bill 184 is the work zone camera program. So of course, we all know why we're here. These are national statistics from the end of 2001 related to work zone fatalities and injuries. By the time I am done speaking here today, there will have been an injury in a work zone. There was obviously a drop in 2019 and 2020 due to the pandemic. And these crashes are occurring most often in summer and fall when the weather is nicer, people are driving faster, and that is leading to a higher chances of fatality and crashes. And there are also more construction projects happening during the summer and fall months, rather in the winter and spring, where colder and harsher temperature, slows down work. These are the statistics that we have been faced with in Connecticut since 2015. Much like everywhere else around the country, people are driving faster, cars are being made heavier, it takes longer to stop or slow down. And these are preventable crashes, and there is a serious need to change driver behavior to make them slow down in construction zones by appropriate signage and color recognition. But there is a very significant problem. So in 2021, the Connecticut General Assembly passed a pilot program for our work zone speed control camera program. In 2022, the pilot program went into effect, and we started with first doing data collection and researching and studying how to best implement it. In April in 2023, after all the research and data was collected, we started with the first 3 deployments, which started doing actual speed enforcement. And there were a lot of warnings at first. I'll get into the how our system works in the next slide, but there were a couple months where we were just issuing warnings, and the first fine was issued in June of 2023. So the way the Connecticut program works is there are 3 locations in the state at any one time. The legislation capped us at 3 deployments. We have to have conspicuous road signs placed at a reasonable distance to notify drivers that a work zone speed control system may be in operation. Again, this is not a gotcha program. It's about changing driver behavior. We're not trying to hide the ball on any of this. we have a website for our Know the Zone program. Well, we had it when the pilot was operational, where you can see where the deployments were occurring. We have three sort of tiers in the pilot program. There were three types of violations. The first violation is simply a written warning. And for the second violation, you were fined $75, and for a subsequent violation, it was a fine of $150. And there were provisions in the legislation about there being no personally identifiable information that could be stored or retained by the department or a vendor, unless the information is necessary for the collection and enforcement of fines.
Can I ask you a question about
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, if you don't mind interrupting during the presentation, that is.
No, and I didn't know if you wanted to wait to the end but however you want to do it.
Yeah, just so I don't forget is the main thing. So on the violations, one of the questions we had is the second violation, can you get the second violation that will have a assessment or fine, dollar fine associated with it? Our bill has a similar setup like yours. But we had a question about, can you get the second violation if you haven't yet gotten the first violation in the mail? So like you went through on the way to work and on the way back, you sped again, is that 2 violations? Or do you?
So there's nothing in our law about that. Okay. However, for our own internal procedures, we created what we called a cool down period of 2 weeks. Okay. So what would happen is we would, once the initial violation was processed and as soon as the vendor issued the warning notice, we waited 17 days basically, because we would give it a couple of days for the violation to the notice of violation to actually arrive, and then we would give that person 2 weeks to open their mail, I guess, think about what they've done. I don't know, but yeah, to avoid a situation where someone the system becomes we do a deployment, someone drives through and speeds twice a day on their way to and from work, and then they get, one warning notice and then 9 violations in the mail all at once. We didn't want to have that happen. So that's actually not in the statute, but that's how we implemented it in practice.
Okay, so that's good to know, 2 weeks. And then you do have a law enforcement officer, even though you're working with a third-party vendor. Do you have a law enforcement officer looking at each violation? Is that correct?
We do. The state police reviews every violation, even including the warning notices. They review those. So it goes from our vendor to the state police, and then if there is a fine, that goes to our centralized infractions bureau within our judicial department.
Do you have law enforcement review the warnings as well, or just if it's the second?
They review the warnings as well.
Because it's a violation, because it counts for Senator Eagle.
How interactive are the signs that you have posted? Is there anything like that you have that's showing your speed as you're going through the work zone, or anything that says that once the cameras clicked that, hey, you're in violation, or anything like that? I mean, because in our small communities, I'm sure you have them as well. They have, as you're coming into town, say, you are too fast, slow down, or whatever. Is there how interactive are the signs?
They're not interactive at all. It's mostly just your standard sort of MUTCD compliant work zone speed limit photo enforced. I actually don't know if that's MUTCD compliant, come to think of it. Not an engineer. But yeah, we have basic signage. There's no your speed type signs going into the work zones. That's not required. And I don't know if the program has ever utilized those in those work zones.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Senator Chin.
This is a really great presentation. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, Elizabeth. We are currently contemplating just controlled access highways, so like interstates or separate. Is that similar to any original parameters you had in your rollout?
We are limited in the pilot. We were limited to limited access highways. We are currently we have a bill before, because the pilot ended in December of last year, and we currently have a bill before the Joint Transportation Committee in Connecticut that would make the program permanent. That's actually being heard on Monday. And in that proposal, we have removed the limitation on limited access highways, but for the purposes of the pilot, it was only limited access.
Thank you.
Okay. Obviously, the experience from the pilot was positive. If you, in fact, are moving it from a pilot and stage into something more permanent, more expansive.
Yeah. It was, and I can actually get in because I've got a little bit of data that I can show you in a couple later slides. We also do have a report that we were required to submit to the Connecticut General Assembly as a result of the pilot, and I can share that with committee staff. And that has a lot of the data and a lot of really interesting speed tables and graphs about some of the sites where we collected the most data and we got the most information, where we had longer deployments. And it's very interesting, and it did bear out our belief that it would be effective. Yeah, I can, keep rolling, and then if you want to interrupt me again, feel free. But this is just, as I indicated, a kind of overview how the program works. As I said, system identifies the vehicle coming. We were doing equal to or greater than 15 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. That was the limit that was in the statute. And that is when an event is triggered. It does not continually capture images and store them. So it's only takes a photo when it detects a vehicle going at 50 miles an hour or over the speed limit. And then, the series of images are captured.
Or fast.
Yep. And the information gets sent to the state police after that. And I said, the first offense was the fine, the first offense was the warning, second offense is $75. And the subsequent offenses are $150. And these are just a few common questions we got that we posted on our website. One important area to highlight is that these violations do not generate points against a motorist license, and the information does not get sent to insurance companies. One of the things we try to liken it to is that it's more like a parking ticket than it is a moving violation. But then that we just, we it's just a monetary fine. It doesn't have any of those additional implications. And again, the personal information and data privacy is protected.
So, in your earlier slide, your work zone speed, oh no, it's right here, 45 or greater. Hours are generally 55. So,
Okay.
I mean, if you added 15 miles, that people could be driving 70 miles per hour through these work zones. No, 55 and 50.
Oh, for added 50, yeah, I was adding it to 45.
No, they're,
Right, yeah, 70 in Vermont.
yeah, which seems a little fast for a work zone. So I guess we need to look at what makes sense, or do we adjust the 55? I don't know, but anyway, the 15 relative to the 45 compared to our 55 is quite a difference.
We have only 10 miles over right now.
Mhm.
And where did you get your information as you're setting the program up? Did you guys just take a leap of faith, or where did you guys research?
Pennsylvania mostly. I've only been at the department a year, so I missed out on all of this, the effort that went into proposing this, but my understanding is this was largely based on Pennsylvania statute. And I will note that in our new proposal, where, and we do have some 55, 65 mile an hour areas where we've been using this program, we found that we clocked people going in excess of 90 miles an hour in some circumstances going through these work zones. And we sort of made the decision in proposing the bill that's up for debate this year that those people should not get a warning. So the bill that is before the Transportation Committee on Monday specifically says that anyone going in excess of 85 miles an hour will not get a warning. They go straight to a violation. We thought that was appropriate.
Yeah.
In the work zones, when you were set up in the work zones, was always when it was an active work zone? Because the confusion sometimes is that the signs are still up, and you always want to be respectful, but you're like, okay, is this valid? Or so, I mean, is it always when somebody's working, or once you target a zone, the cameras stay there until you don't target it anymore, 24/7?
Yeah, the practice is that when people are working there, would have to go back to check the bill specifically to see if that is required in the statute. It does link the definition of work zone in our bill links back to an existing statute about endangering a highway worker, and I would have to double check what that specifically, how work zone is defined in that bill. but yeah, the practice is when it's an active work zone.
Yeah.
And you said, and I apologize if you said it already. You said, so what changes have you, or what did you get right? What did you get wrong with the pilot?
So the changes that we are requesting in making the program permanent is we want to remove the limit on just the 3 deployments because we think there are more locations where we could use this type of technology. As I mentioned, we're removing the limited access highway limitation. We wanted to be able to do it on any state road if there is a construction project. We are adding the you go straight to a monetary fine if you're going over 85 miles an hour. Trying to remember what else we changed. I think those might have been the large. We did have to I should note we have a bit of a struggle with the data provisions. And I noticed this actually you addressed this in your bill as well. So the pilot was only 8 months and we said that the data would be purged after a year. Well, the problem going forward now is how long do we keep the data for purposes of issuing a subsequent violation, right? So like if you get a warning 1 year and then we have to purge all the data and then the following year you go through and you're clocked going, in excess of 15 miles an hour. Oh, you know what? That's another thing. We went down from 15 to 10 miles an hour in our proposal because, we thought the 15 was a little too high. That's a big one. I forgot about that. But going back to the data provisions, when, let's say you get another violation within that year, how long does the warning last? How long can we keep that data? So we decided to go with a year. So basically the way it will work is that you get a warning and that warning will kind of stay on the books for a year. After a year, we purge that data and you sort of get a clean slate and you can get another warning. We, had to balance the concerns about retention of this data from there are a lot of groups who are very concerned about this type of technology and the data it can collect. So we had to balance those needs with also our desire to, assess, higher levels of fines. So that was kind of where we've landed in our proposal. I don't know if the legislature in Connecticut will have different opinions, but kind of that's where we are right now.
We have more questions, but I also want her to get through her slides. So let's get through a few more slides.
Yes, some of the slides might answer your questions or might generate more questions, which is fine. We did actually had an incredibly effective media and campaigning effort. There was a lot of work to do around promoting and campaigning on the project.
We don't.
Yes.
That's a billboard.
Yep, that's a billboard.
We don't have billboards.
Yeah. We did a lot of, we did press conferences. We did a lot of social media. We really worked hard to, promote the project. And the emphasis on this is safety, not revenue generation. I'll show you from the number of tickets we got that this was not a moneymaker for us. But, we really wanted to change driver behavior. So we did the press conference launch. We did a lot of our team here at DOT did a lot of communication. So I don't know what the best method of reaching motorists in Vermont might be. Obviously, it's not billboards, but in Connecticut, we used a lot of different tactics to really promote the safety message. And I think it did help change behavior because the more people who are aware of the fact that they might get a ticket for speeding for a work zone, it did change their behavior, I think, and did contribute to people slowing down for the work zones, which is the ultimate goal. We got a lot of feedback. It was a bit of a mixed bag. A lot of people still see this as revenue collection and trying to make money. There's a lot of concerns that, some people don't have a lot of money and that the fine is, disproportionately impacts, communities who are underprivileged. So there, it was, there's still a lot of skepticism, and I can get into also that a little bit when I'll talk briefly about our municipal option automated enforcement program, because I think some of the discussion on there is relevant. But in terms of the cumulative totals of what the fines we collected and the violations we found. So we did about 2.6 million vehicles went through. Now, I don't know if there were individual vehicles, but we had 2.6 vehicles recorded going through these deployments. We found over 500,000 of them were speeding, so going in excess of the speed limit. We issued 23,825 warnings to people who were going 15 miles an hour or more over the speed limit. And we did issue a very small number of citations relative to that number. So I think this lends to the notion that people would speed going through the work zone, they would get the warning, and then they would change their behavior because they were, they didn't want to they were now aware that this was a potential safety risk. And of course, they probably didn't want to get a $75 fine. So we think this was very effective at deterring deterring behavior without, without imposing a financial burden on the residents of Connecticut. And it did show, the data we collected did show a significant reduction in speeds through the work zone. There were 2 deployments on Interstate 95 that showed that speed reduced by 17 to 18% during the deployment. We had 1 deployment on I-95 in Norwalk, Connecticut, which I don't know how familiar you are with Connecticut, but that's in Lower Fairfield County near the New York border. And that provided a really good controlled site for analysis because we maintain the same lane configurations and similar conditions throughout the pilot duration. We were also able to get before and after data on that particular site. And that showed that the speeds were reduced by between 17 and 18% in that site, and some of the other sites on I-95 were able to collect a lot of data.
Miles per hour speed was
reduced 17%. And yeah,
maybe from your report, something like an 80% reduction in people going speeding.
our report will have that information. I'll have to look at what specifically that number was. It has some really interesting speed data tables, which it'll show you the distribution. It's like a distribution curve of the speeds that everyone was clocked at going before enforcement, and then during enforcement, and then after enforcement. And one of the things it does show is that the speeds remained low even after enforcement stopped. So hopefully it will be, it will reflect a change in behavior that lasted even beyond the duration of the pilot. So I don't know if this is a good place to pause and ask for more questions, and then I can quickly just talk a little bit about our municipal option program because it might be relevant to your interest. So.
Elizabeth, on slide 6, I did look ahead. I don't think you have this question answered in your slides, but on slide 6, your visual shows that this attached to a vehicle. My question is are they permanently attached to vehicles, or is it something that you would just deploy for that vehicle for that day? And the follow-up question is, would they usually be, if it is on a vehicle that the device is set up on, usually law enforcement vehicles that are clearly marked as law enforcement, or are they just minivans that are white?
So our vendor for this program is Vera Mobility, and they use a white van. It's not marked as law enforcement, even though there are the signs that go up that say speed limit photo enforced. And the virtue of doing the van is that they can be moved. So if the project sort of slowly, over the course of, several weeks or whatnot, moves further down the road, they can move the van, they can recalibrate it, and then it can, there's a little bit more flexibility when it's it's attached to the van. In our municipal, and these are short-term, they're work zone projects, so they're not permanent projects. In our municipal option program for the towns for the speed and red light cameras, those would be fixed cameras that are approved for a 3-year period, and the idea there is that those are potentially like permanent fixtures. But this, because the work zones aren't permanent, it's been very useful to have the vans. And then one thing we did attempt to do is we tried using it for some maintenance projects, so some like highway mowing and whatnot. It's not a great use because the van has to be recalibrated every time it stops, so you can't really, like, if there's a crew that's doing mowing and they're moving down one stretch of highway over the course of the day, the van can't really follow them. So we definitely learned a little bit about the types of projects that this is helpful for and the types of projects it's not.
Thank you.
It's kind of a combination
Yeah.
between the law enforcement and the third party vendor.
So the ticket comes from the police, or it comes from DMV? It comes from, what does it say on the ticket that the people get?
The ticket, the vendor issues the violation, the warning notice and the violation. It is designed to look similar to the type of ticket you would receive from law enforcement, but it's obviously different because you're receiving it in the mail. I can also send you, and I don't know if it's in the report, I can send you a copy of what it looks like.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Thank you. That'd be
If it's in
great.
the report, we can get it from there. But if not, if we have time, that would be great.
Oh, absolutely. No, I can send you any information. And if there's anything you want as follow-up, have committee staff contact me and we're happy to share it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. And I'll just quickly touch on our municipal program because it does kind of inform a lot of the attitudes and some of the policies we had here. You know, we passed a bill last year that gives municipalities the authority to use automated traffic enforcement safety devices, so speed cameras and red light cameras within the municipalities. The municipalities themselves, you know, will hold a public hearing and pass an act on an approved plan. The plan comes to us and it has to be approved by CTDOT. And we're responsible with determining whether the plan is likely to improve traffic safety at the proposed locations and if the device's distribution throughout the municipality is equitable. I mentioned the concern about negative impacts on economically disadvantaged communities, and that was a big factor in the debate on this particular bill. So we recently set our guidance out earlier this January that addresses how we're going to review these proposals. And we basically conduct a two-part analysis on these proposals we get from the towns, a safety analysis and an equity analysis. And we take a data-driven approach in the safety analysis, and the towns have to provide information justifying that each selected location will improve safety. You know, for red light cameras, we're requiring there be at least 2 crashes related to red light running for each location within the prior 3 years. And then for our, you know, equity analysis, you know, we actually used an existing designation of qualified census tracts, which is used by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, where at least half the households have a lower income than most of the surrounding region. And we limited the number of QCTs in these shaded areas. There's a distinction there between pink and blue because of size. We're putting 2, you're capping people at 2 in the pink areas and 1 in the blue areas. And just, you know, trying to take steps in our municipal option program to make sure that these are not over concentrated in communities of color, economically disadvantaged communities, because that was a major concern as we are debating the bill. So we published these guidelines in January, and we've had a lot of inquiries about the program, but as of yet, we have not received any applications. But that is just another thing that is sort of going on in the background of our Workzone program. So I just wanted to share that quickly.
Yeah, we have municipalities that want to do the same thing here, so.
Yep. So.
Well, yeah, we will take a closer look at the report, but yeah, that's very helpful. We appreciate it. We actually tried to get somebody from Pennsylvania and we couldn't get them to come in, so we appreciate that you did come in.
Oh no, we're happy to do it. And I know our commissioner has a good relationship with the VTDOT commissioner, and so we're always happy to come in and share information and any way we can. And I have family in Vermont, so I would be, you know, I'm always happy to help out making the roads in Vermont safer. So thank you so much. So my Waitsfield.
Oh, in the valley.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's my district.
Oh, well, wonderful. Well, I'll tell my family that I spoke with you.
Great, yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for coming, very helpful.
Great
Thank
testimony.
you. Yep. Take care.
Yeah, have a good day. So is Captain Lone on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
There he is.
Good morning.
Morning, Captain.
I spoke earlier to Sheriff Anderson, and I didn't know if it would be best if he went first because he has a lot more of the technology and sort of the speed enforcement knowledge. Would it
Okay.
be okay if I had him come in first?
Yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah,
Thank you.
Sheriff Anderson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Committee. For the
Morning.
record, Mark Anderson, Wyndham County Sheriff, and I'm here in my capacity as President of the Vermont Sheriff's Association. Thank you for the time for this. I will be brief because I'm also a master instructor for the state of Vermont in radar and LiDAR speed measurement devices. These are the tools that law enforcement use. Well, I teach an 8-hour program on both devices. So I'm not going to make you suffer through what my students have to go through, but I do want to cover some technology points as it pertains to speed measurement devices, whether operated by a law enforcement officer or by an automated device. There's 3 primary areas which I will discuss. One's scientific, one's moral, and then one's legal. On the science base, we teach law enforcement officers to set up, test, and operate in an automated sense. There would be a technician, whether that is from within a government agency or vendor, who would also need to be able to set up, test, and operate one of these devices. The key about I'm going to use radar because I think it's the most familiar, but LiDAR is very similar. The key about radar is that it detects motion. It doesn't necessarily detect the direction of vehicles traveling. And that's very important because things like military radar in an aircraft or a boat, they do care about the direction. We don't have multi-million-dollar radar arrays for traffic radar. So we are talking about a much more watered down technology. Because of this, within law enforcement applications, we depend on the operator to address the motion aspect, to address what the environment around the device being operated is like, so that they can detect anomalies that are based on physics, very understandable, recognizable circumstances that can ultimately be determined to be a correct reading or an incorrect reading. Radar, it's an acronym, stands for radio detection and ranging. It depends on the Doppler principle. The most common way I can show you the Doppler principle is to say, stand outside by the train track. When the train comes, it gets louder. When the train goes away, it gets quieter. That's the Doppler principle in reflection. Radar detects what's called relative motion. And so the easy way I show that is just take 2 hands and clap them together. They're relative to each other. That's the motion radar detects. We teach officers to use what's called tracking history. And so they have visual observations they make where they identify the vehicle they're targeting. An automated system would do the same thing. Estimate the speed. An automated system can't estimate the speed. It's going to just make a computed algorithmic calculation. Estimate the range of the vehicle. That's to determine if it has targeted a vehicle beyond the range at which the device is capable or is very well capable of detecting, as well as check the environment. Those are things for, checking for things that are known to interfere with these devices. The operator would also listen to the audio from the device. So they're listening for the pitch and the clarity of the tone that comes out of the device. And then they're also confirming that what they see and hear is consistent with their visual observation of the vehicle, and that it is a consistent readout from the device. I am not an expert on the automated systems. I'm not an instructor on the automated systems. I've seen, I was part of the Act, I believe it was Act 55 study from 2021, where AOT researched speed cameras and was an active member of that. We heard from Pennsylvania as well as vendors regarding the technologies that are available. I am not wholly confident that they have addressed many of the aspects of physics that are important for how radar or LiDAR would be addressed, but I'm also not here to say that they are, that I'm aware of any information that says that they don't satisfy them. So from a scientific standpoint, I raised concerns and certainly would want to ensure if Vermont did deploy automated speed cameras, that those concerns are addressed, because ultimately what we are talking about is confidence in the a system that the government will be deploying. You heard testimony from the person before me with what our goal is, and it really is traffic safety. And so as I get into the morals of what we're trying to do, I mean, we are talking about the same thing. We're talking about keeping construction workers safe in work zones. We could apply this in school zones. We could apply this in other special circumstance areas where we are looking to reduce crashes and fatalities. You will commonly see deputy sheriffs also in these work zones attempting to slow down traffic. And our deputies are very much members of the work zone crew. And so we also will have concerns about their safety. So I'm very passionate about reducing crashes and ways to do it. And I really appreciated the testimony from Connecticut DOT on the goals of their program in doing so. When we talk about traffic safety, we're talking about the three pillars of it. You've heard me talk about this before: engineering, education, and enforcement. We need all three to do it. Typically, when we talk about law enforcement, performing speed enforcement within a work zone or other identified area, they are engaging in enforcement. That's obvious, but they're also engaging in education, explaining to an operator why they think that their speed is dangerous or could impact other people. So we generally accomplish those two things. In an automated setting, we are going to be using an engineered solution to conduct enforcement. And so we're not necessarily having that education piece. And part of the Act 55 report did talk about trying to use education as a key component rather than fines. I also understand based on I'll call it the methods that the federal government has incentivized states to deploy these, education might not be a key component to get funding. So with that, I understand a balancing act to address ways that we could implement a system with reasonable fines. But I want to be adamant in saying that the purpose of these should be for the purposes of reducing crashes. One of the things I do want to bring to your attention, this is very much the human aspect of the morals. My department was providing law enforcement services to a town in Windham County. We had a request from the select board saying we have all these speeding complaints on this road between 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. every morning, and we really want it to stop. The residents are complaining, everyone's complaining. So we deployed several deputies to that area to stop the cars who were speeding. They were going 25 plus miles an hour over the speed limit. Many of them received tickets. At the next select board meeting, we were told, but we don't want you to write the tickets to the locals.
Oh,
So since that learning experience, and we said we don't care, they were violating the law, we treat violations of the law equally, but since that, it's become a honest conversation with select boards, with decision makers, to say, when you ask us to be impactful with speeding tickets, don't be surprised when people come complaining. That is a feature of this system that people generally don't like tickets. This will stop locals. It will stop out-of-staters. It will stop everyone. And I think with the programmatics of what Connecticut DOT shared with their data, ideally it stops them with a warning. But if it does go to the citation, there will simply be complaints. And I caution that as an awareness item, not that I am bothered by it. I don't want anyone surprised.
We had the same situation up our way, Sheriff, where somebody had made repeated complaints, and the first person that got stopped was the person that made the complaints. So it's it's a system that catches anybody that's violating the law.
but the advantage of this on a state highway is it doesn't have that kind of local relationship and neighborhood that you've got between the select board and, and you're right, the safety issues and the speed doesn't matter whether you're local or whether you're, from out of Vermont. So at least
Unfortunately, a
state highway and state
will hurt regardless of the state the license plate reflects. So just quickly moving on to legal. most of Vermont's case law comes from actually other states as it pertains to traffic violations. And so I'm not the legal expert on how the judiciary should transact these things, how law enforcement would interact with the judiciary to transact these things. There are better minds for that. But I do want to call out a couple things. One is a case from New Jersey called State v. D'Antonio. These are precedential cases from across the country, often reaching state appeals or Supreme Court level decisions, and they've had an impactful effect in Vermont. State v. D'Antonio is a New Jersey case where what the court found is that Doppler principle could have judicial notice found for it. Again, the Doppler principle is detecting the compression of sound waves or other types of waves, radio waves. And so that's how the technology does a whole bunch of math to figure out what the speed of a vehicle is. So for judicial notice to be found, what has to happen is what's called either a Daubert hearing or a Frye hearing. And that is a judicial hearing where the court would determine if the basis of the technology, the scientific tools are generally accepted by the scientific community, and that they were working the same immediately before and immediately after the violation was determined. So that would be a hearing that would need to be transacted, I assume, for this technology, because it does differentiate from what we've currently had established for judicial notice with either traffic radar or LiDARs operated by a law enforcement officer. There's another case called Honeycutt v. Commonwealth. This is a stationary radar case from Kentucky, where they required that the vehicle being targeted be out front, closest to and well separated from other vehicles. And so as we talk about interstate work zone, we often see slowdown, we see a contraction of traffic into that area. And so how these devices would recognize a lot of vehicles in a small area, we want to make sure that they have accurate readings, because we, again, want to maintain confidence in our government systems and not opportunities that could concern operators. Finally, on legal, Vermont currently relies on law enforcement officers to prosecute traffic cases. I should say traffic tickets, Vermont civil violation complaints. So I raised the question of who would be prosecuting these. And I very much liked testimony from Connecticut DOT on how they said they're treating these more like parking tickets. And so I'm going to close my testimony with what I offer as potential solutions for consideration. First off, as you saw, over 2 million vehicles in Connecticut were evaluated. We're considering Vermont traffic and saying that's a lot of cars coming through our work zones each day. I would highly encourage reflecting on automation. The General Assembly passed a policy on license plate readers, I think it was about 5 years ago, which effectively rendered the automated license plate readers not usable by law enforcement. Most agencies, or I believe all agencies, no longer use them. This technology, generally what I've seen from vendors, does rely on automated license plate readers. So I would encourage examining the prior General Assembly's considerations for those policies. I'm not here to say that they are that was a bad policy. I'm just saying the impact on the use of these tools would also be considered in this technology. I would encourage a ticketing platform like a parking ticket. Do not rely on the Vermont civil violation complaint. We don't know who the driver is in a parked car. We don't know who the driver is we don't have tolls in Vermont, but we don't know who a driver is necessarily who's driving through a toll booth in another state. Let's find ways that address it that doesn't require identification of the driver. To do so is problematic for law enforcement and for these technologies. We also don't want to be encouraging behavior like was seen in Arizona, where one creative operator was putting on, I think it was a monkey mask, and would drive around with the monkey mask on. And so the operator couldn't be identified, which is also counter to the traffic safety objectives. And then the issue about the government versus a third-party vendor. I'm going to speak my personal opinion to this. The government generally already has this information. the public generally understands when a police officer pulls a car over, they have access to the license and to the registration information. There's no shift in policy really on what the government has access to. Bringing in a third-party vendor to transact this means we're sharing that information with them. It means they have access to information that might be in the realm of discomfort for the public, for civil liberty purposes. And so, personal opinion, I don't think that third-party vendors should be managing this data. I do have concerns for that. I would encourage, if you haven't already received testimony, hearing from the ACLU, I'm sure that there are other civil liberty organizations that would be interested in how that data is transacted. Connecticut brought up several interesting points about how they're managing data and also about some of the issues they're running into. So I think that that is very much worthy of conversation, which is also why I really appreciate the contemplation that this would, as written in the most recent draft, I believe, it would expire in a couple of years. Let's do pilot projects. Let's learn. That makes sense. I do share hesitancy with some of the technology, but I also like to come up with impactful policies that accomplish the goals we want, which is traffic safety. And then finally, with the triggering speed, not here to offer a number, but to offer a suggestion of an experience. Stand in a work zone when a car goes by at 50 miles an hour, stand in a work zone when a car goes by at 70 miles an hour. Just the pressure you feel on your body is immense. When our cars rock, when we're sitting in a work zone looking for a car speeding, and it's like, I don't even need to look at the radar to know that they were going really fast. It's scary. And this is what the workers are exposed to every day, thousands of repetitions each day. So thank you for
We've
the
got
time.
the flaggers in, and they said that same thing. Well, thank you, Sheriff Anderson, for testimony.
Thank you. I think the sheriff made a very valid point about the information that's already out there. It's just like the study that was done yesterday, where they were actually able to go into the systems and capture the vehicles that were registered and all of that stuff. I mean, I think we can be a little bit oversensitive to some of that information that's already readily available. Well, you shouldn't be keeping that information. Well, that information's already out there. They know, where the cars are. They know where they're registered. They were able to look at that household and tell how many cars that were registered there based on the address. So,
I know you want to move along, but really quick with the sheriff. We are currently at 10 miles or over triggers the warning. Connecticut just testified 15 miles or over, but they have a 45-mile-per-hour base. What do you?
Said they're going to change it to 10.
They're going to change it to 10. Okay. Any thoughts on the 10 miles or more than 10 miles over the limit?
If we were to pick a number, I'm more sensitive to special areas such as work zones or school zones. My personal practice, I would go 5 miles an hour when I would stop a car, but I'd be more interested in issuing a warning and education on why we are really sensitive in a work zone where there's less protections for the operators. Given this is an automated solution, I think over 10 miles an hour is a reasonable number. I also appreciate the consideration about the difference of 45 miles an hour in their work zones versus 55 in our work zone. So I can't necessarily give a definitive answer other than I support where you're currently looking. I think it is reasonable, makes sense, and I can certainly check with my counterparts if you'd like us to give a definitive number.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to Captain Lone. And Megan, did you tell Jack you were running? Yeah, okay.
Thank you for giving him the opportunity to talk before I did. He just has a lot more of the technical knowledge than I do.
Sure.
I've talked to the committee before. My concerns come from both the resources involved and civil liberties and privacy issues. I did read the new version. I think there's a lot of great changes made. Some of the issues that I think that we might have as we move forward in a project like this is, unlike Connecticut, if it were to be on the state police is a full service agency. So we manage about 50% of the population with day-to-day calls. You look at, just as an example, I-89 in Burlington, 50,000 cars go through there. If 1% of those cars is speeding, we have 500 tickets to at least review. So it is a big impact on resources. And I know the point of this, and we talked about this earlier for the committee, was to make sure that law enforcement are out there working on violent crime, working on our overdose fatalities and these other things. But pulling law enforcement off to write tickets may be a problem. So I personally lean more towards the automation side because I think that there's a value in keeping law enforcement on the road, not behind a computer. Now, saying that and just offering this up, there is a possibility to civilianize things. I think that is a big move in law enforcement right now, as we have a harder time recruiting people and keeping people, is to look at civilianizing people with government authority, but they're not specifically law enforcement officers. They don't have power of arrest, which might be an option if we don't want to use a third party or if we don't want to use an external vendor. If we could civilianize the idea of providing these fines, much like I think earlier we talked about parking tickets. Parking tickets are not usually issued by law enforcement officers. They're issued by parking attendants. There are people that don't carry firearms. Yes, sir.
So on that point, Captain, where we have the best of the best in the state police, which I believe that we do, and we still struggle with making sure that rules are followed and not violated. How can we be assured that these citizens aren't going to abuse the power of where they're at, where we already have, we've already run into some problems with people that are the best of the best, taking authority to the next level?
That's a great question. I think that there's always a risk when you use human beings. But the vetting process, and I'll give you an example. I run a fusion center that runs at a secret and often top secret level. Our people are privy to all sorts of information under several different federal agencies, and they're phenomenal handling that information because we vetted them, we trained them, and we picked the right people. So I think when you look at a program like this, if you were going to give people the power to issue fines and to review this, we really need to hold them accountable. We need to make sure that they would have a background similar to a police officer. So, sir, as an example, if I hire a civilian person to work inside my fusion center, they go through the same exact process a state trooper does, minus the polygraph. So we go back up to 7 years. We talk to their neighbors, we talk to their friends, their ex, partners. We try to do everything we can to pick the right people that are going to make the right decisions. And unfortunately, as you know, it doesn't always work. And we have that in law enforcement too. But it is an option that would allow us to continue to do enforcement out on the streets and reduce the violent crime issue that we have right now, and reduce traffic safety without kind of losing some of the power that we have out on the streets, the enforcement capabilities. So as I was reading this and as we were talking, I just wanted to introduce that as an idea. I mean, I don't mean to push this committee in any direction, but that is something that would alleviate both sides of the situation. We could still, as a state, own it if we have concerns about a third party, but we would not be pulling law enforcement officer off the road. Connecticut State Police is a phenomenal organization. There's almost 1,000 members of sworn members, and they are specifically, most of their work is done on highway enforcement. So in the rural parts, in the left, in the western part of Pennsylvania, they do some more like what the Vermont State Police do. But the majority of what we do is essentially it's local policing. It's rural policing. And that would pull us away from that if we are sitting behind computers, kind of checking and verifying all of these tickets.
Yeah, well, I was told that we kind of had to have a police officer do that, but maybe because of due process or something, but we'll look into that. If there's a way to do it without pulling an officer off the streets, putting him behind him or her behind a desk, then I would agree.
Or maybe we need to clarify, because we're really talking about, if in fact it's like a parking ticket, then why are you setting up a more elaborate kind of law enforcement centric process behind it? Because the fundamental issue is around safety. So I don't think anyone would want to in any way add more competition for the very highly trained law enforcement officers for this particular initiative. So I guess we can look at that in terms of, and because in many ways, there shouldn't be a lot of judgment in issuing the ticket. Frankly, it should be driven by the information around the vehicle, around the speed, etc. So it's not the same kind of nuances maybe law enforcement would be doing if it were a traditional traffic stop.
Yeah, that's kind of what Sheriff Anderson said. Who's gonna, if somebody makes an appeal, does it go to the judicial bureau, or is it just like a parking ticket where they just send it in and the vendor or the state deals with it as an administrative task?
Yeah. I think the key point around a lot of the judicial side is the paying of the fine more than the education side. So really where it gets into the judicial side is getting the fine paid and the ability to say, I don't agree with, this, and I would like to take it to court. Without that, if we look at solely as like a parking ticket where you would be assessed a fine, but it's really focused on education, I think it plays less of a part. And we could probably have a bigger impact because if we had more people putting more warnings out, that's going to have a bigger impact than a few fines. So I didn't want to derail the conversation. It's just, we've been talking a lot about civilianizing throughout the US. We're talking about civilianizing positions in law enforcement because of the recruiting issues. When we have the opportunity, and it's a focus of mine within my own units. And I thought, as this was as we were discussing it, it just kind of came to me that this might be an opportunity for that.
Yeah, thank you. We'll look into that for sure.
Well, we're certainly looking at all avenues. I mean, the fact that we're even looking at cameras and we're progressing at the speed that we are, I know my mind's starting to wrap around it a lot better. So any of that information is very helpful, especially as we, I'm sure we're going to be looking at other things as we find ways to keep our people safe. So appreciate any of the extra comments.
Anything else, Captain Long, or?
No, sir, not unless you have any questions for me. I just wanted to be here and available for any questions. I saw the changes and I appreciate you taking testimony before.
Appreciate the strength that you sent to Newport for us. We had a great forum up there, and I know you were involved with some of the people that were coming up there, and thank you very much.
Thank you for holding it. It had a big impact. We appreciate it.
And yeah, thanks for being available on this. We might continue to be in touch as it goes through the process.
Sounds great. Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you. Is Jackie waiting, Megan?
Yes. Do you want
Yeah, we're ready.
to go?
Oh, she's here in person. Okay. You want to?
Well, I need to just.
Okay. Well, we can take a 5-minute break.
I don't know.
We're going to take a 5-minute break.
Something. Okay.